The other leading voices in the fight against marijuana is Kevin Sabet. He's the former senior advisor on drug issues at the White House, and he's also the author of the book Reefer Sanity: 7 Great Risks About Marijuana. He says the typical marijuana user starts young.
Well, we know that the typical person who initiates marijuana is someone who's young, under 21. And what's troubling about legalization and this effort is that we know that in order for these businesses to make money, they have to make money, they only make money off people who are addicted. And those who are addicted start when they're very young. So really what I'm concerned about is the creation of a new industry, similar to how we've had big tobacco for the last 80 years, now going to be called big marijuana, targeting the typical marijuana initiate, who's essentially a 13 or 14-year-old American.
Well, let's expand on that a bit, because the rate of marijuana use among U.S. adults has increased over the past decade. And if you want to take a look at the numbers, here they are, provided by the U.S. government. In 2002, 6.2% of U.S. adults said they used marijuana in the past month. In 2011, 7% said they had used it in the past month. That amounts to about 18 million Americans. So let me ask you, why do you think the rate of use is going up, and how much more is it going to go up, given what you're positing just a moment ago?
Yeah, I mean, the issue is the perception of harm has gone way down in the last 5 years alone. Actually, what's interesting and sort of deceptive about those statistics is that we actually had a reduction in marijuana use up until about 2007. So the number was much lower in 2007. Only since 2007, 2008 has there really been a significant increase. And I think that can be attributed to all the discussion about legalization and, frankly, businesses and corporations that are now making light of marijuana use, putting out the incorrect notion that marijuana is not addictive.
You know, Kevin, you're talking about this perception of harm, how it's diminished. I want to throw some more figures at you, and I want to get your thoughts on perhaps the history of all of this. Gallup did a survey also looking to find out how many U.S. adults had ever tried marijuana. Found 38% of American adults had tried the drug. That's up significantly from one of the first surveys, which took place in 1969. Just 4% said that they had tried marijuana. We know that most of the rise occurred in the 1970s. How much of the drug situation today can be actually attributed to what happened in the U.S. in the 1970s?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's actually true that the number of marijuana users at an age group that's increasing is actually the baby boomers who might have, used in their teens when they were in the 60s and 70s, stopped when they had kids and maybe taking it up again. And I think this issue of legalization, a lot of people vote for it thinking this is just about allowing an otherwise responsible adult to come home from work and relax a little bit with a joint. We know that that's not what this is about at all. This is about creating a new industry, just like big tobacco, that's going to start to hook kids, that's going to hook them early, and going to lie about the health effects on kids.
Kevin, you were an advisor at the White House on this issue, so I want to ask you this question about the war on drugs, so to speak. Use of marijuana doesn't vary much between race or educational background. Rates are generally the same from group to group, yet blacks are more likely than any other group to be arrested. And the same can be said for other drugs like cocaine. How much does the United States really need to take a look at this war on drugs, and how much reform needs to be put in place?
The idea that legalization would be the savior for this is pretty ridiculous when you look at the fact that for all crimes there's racial bias, so not just marijuana. And secondly, maybe more importantly, legal industries target poor communities of color, okay? This is why we have 8 times as many liquor stores in poor communities of color than in upper-class privileged communities. It's not because upper-class communities don't like to drink, so there aren't liquor stores. It's because they know that they need to advertise and target to the most vulnerable. The most vulnerable are more likely to have an addiction and hold the addiction. If anything, it's going to make us even more racially unjust when we legalize and commercialize any other substance. In this case, it's marijuana.
Kevin, thanks so much for your time and your analysis. Thanks for joining us from Vancouver.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it, Mike.